Hey, well, I'm better than I was last night with all the good news out there.
Yeah, Monday we'll do that.
So, what's interesting, Tilton says about an hour ago on Facebook, the Republic yesterday started with a clean slate. Trump was installed as the Republic president at midnight
Yeah, I
last night.
thought that was pretty strange, I guess, but who knows, what's really going on.
So then he swears in the new justice tonight.
That could be. Maybe that's, the order of things. I just don't know, and only because I only heard it from him, I'm, wondering, well, is it true or not? Like
Is it
with,
true or
with
not?
most things.
Then the one that and TNT's call was very interesting, outlining very succinctly exactly what's going on and why it appears that tomorrow is the day.
Right. Yeah. Tomorrow or Wednesday.
Wednesday at the
Yeah.
latest, and then on Thursday, Friday, Saturday is a holiday, and they'll go out
Yeah,
and
and that
celebrate.
lines up with Zap in terms of timing. Per bankers. I'm sure that's where he's getting his, and I think that was bankers that Tony was quoting. I like that. Um,
That one
oh,
that you sent out, the collapse, boy, that was, I only got halfway through, but that is very interesting.
yeah, he gets a little long-winded, and he gets into the white man thing, which he does
Yeah,
that often. He gets on the racial thing, beating his drum.
but in many respects, it's
There's a lot
true.
of good information in there. I understand.
Yeah, it's true though.
And there he puts a date on when Jassar is supposed to be implemented, the 4th of November.
Okay.
Okay, I like to see dates, so he's kind of putting himself out there, or it sounds like he really knows something special, when you put a date on something.
And Jasara goes into effect after the reset.
Right, yeah, it takes time, yeah. Jassar rolls out after the RV. Yeah, and then, it's Syria, Yemen, Israel, and Palestine, and I guess we finished the Kavanaugh thing. I think that was part of it.
Well, that was very big, a lot bigger than I think anybody realized.
Yeah,
Because
yeah. They're
now,
mostly into the drama, but they don't see the structure to all this.
well, the Dems knew enough that this was going to be the end of the beginning of the end for them. That's why they fought so hard
Sure.
and are continuing to fight.
Yeah, if you really want to understand things, you have to ask more questions all the time. And sometimes I have some more. Other people do, and I listen. Oh yeah, I hadn't thought about that. For instance, I don't know if you get a chance to listen to that video that Dan had with the W intelligence guy. It's
Y-
almost an hour long.
yes.
It's worth your listening to, but he's getting down into how they structure themselves in infiltrating the government. The deep state,
Yeah.
like Einstein and her husband. They don't use the same name, but one does the work and the other one gets the payoff.
Hmm.
Or, it's stretched out over generations, and so-and-so's mother isn't really his mother, but he's related to someone else. So they're always keeping you off balance or a little in the dark or uncertain while they work their wonders.
Hmm.
Uh, what came to mind while listening to the guy, and it was a movie that I saw in the middle '80s called The Brotherhood of the Bell. It was made for TV. It was with Glenn Ford and Dean Jagger, which immediately you think, well, it must be a pretty good drama. So I listened to it, and it was really about how people are kind of brought into the cabal and put in positions, and they basically have an oath of allegiance that they don't live up to it. They've already been blackmailed, and they pay a price.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other hand, if you do what you're supposed to do, they keep moving you up. Well, I looked it up today, Wikipedia, and it was made for TV in 1971. But it was made from a drama that was on TV in 1958. And here's a little something. How you just kind of hook on things sometimes. I've been watching a lot of Lone Ranger episodes. Sometimes two a day, and sometimes they'll have them on for 3 or 4 hours. Half-hour episodes.
Yeah.
And I'm realizing, I missed about 90% of them growing up. I'm having fun, but while I'm watching it, you get a little microcosm of how they looked at talking about crooks. So this guy moved into town here, and he's taken over the town, and he's the sheriff, and he's the mayor, and he runs the newspaper, and or they're just buying up property, and the railroad's coming through, and the settlers have no idea, and it's just kind of like what we see, only much broader, grander scale, and I'm just kind of marveling, because some of the shows they're counterintelligence moves,
Yep.
and they're moral stories, and they're trying to teach you, and it's a little formula, and so on and so forth, and but I'm just kind of marveling at, wait a minute, when I was a kid, I wouldn't understand what all that was about. I couldn't think that deeply. Hadn't been around the block enough.
Yep.
And then so I listened to this guy last night on that, and he made a lot of sense, and I found him very credible, and at the very least provocative. One of the best videos I've listened to this year, I'll say that. Just because it kind of opened my eyes to, a little bit more about how things work. Anyway, the other thing that I noticed, following along with the China and trade, talk of, tariffs and trade war, and their back and forth and so on, was Mike Pompeo was over in China.
Yep.
What do they show in the news? They show him sitting across with his group, across from the Chinese group, and instead of just shaking hands and smiling, they're kind of getting into it. And I'm saying, well, this is all for the public show. This is all about the big showdown over the economy. And it's a collapse. It's playing into that narrative that Joseph is talking about. Yeah, it's just, it's a takedown, necessary takedown. And Joseph says, well, the Chinese hold most of the cards. And I'd say, yeah, and even insinuated that he told Obama in 2016, before he left, or by then, how things, the Chinese said how things would roll, supposing they're in charge, have enough leverage. So, it's all very interesting, or at least you get a little closer seat to the action, a little more, I'll call it intelligence, for lack of a better word. Intelligence doesn't mean that something's true. It's just more complicated and connected and credible and possible than what you would know without any of that. Yeah. There are teachers all over the place. I look at Fulford as something of a teacher, or Robert David Steele and Joseph to a certain extent, with his insight and some of his information. Now, the rare earth elements, that was the other thing they wrote. And I sent over those links. They were probably broken links because they looked like they were broken when I read them and I typed them out. You see, and I'm kind of hoping and guessing. But anyway, the one of rare earth elements, it's true, the United States has rare earth elements. I know that they're in Southern California, not far from the Nevada border, at least some of them, or most of what we have. But they're expensive, and that's why we go to China. And someone made the comment following Yosef's post that, other countries have rare earth elements, it's just that they cost us more, so we go to China. But I think China has more, a larger variety and a larger stockpile than the U.S. But, so I just thought I'd throw that in there. It's not like everything would, maybe some things would come to a halt without access to some of those rare earth elements that we don't have, but it's not all black and white. They have it and we don't.
Like the titanium.
Yeah, that's one of them.
Yeah, that's right.
The names, we don't hear them very often. I can even begin to remember them, but there's 4 or 5 that I commonly run across, but there might be a dozen or 2. Every time you find a rare earth element, I guess maybe they find something they can do with it, and it becomes potentially important, strategic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's that's interesting what Tilton has to say. I'm just waiting for confirmation, I guess, but he sounds like he has some sources, and that's pretty bold.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you have to take notice at the very, very least.
Well, I still believe that this judge, this justice had to be done, and I'm looking for some things to break open here this week.
Well, I think you're probably right, and I hearken to what Yosef said, that the Chinese were calling, here's what we want. We basically own your country, now here's what we want.
Mm-hmm.
We want you to put your government back in place like it was intended to, and we want a conservative court. We don't want these Democrats rewriting the Constitution in the courts.
Well, so, what people forget is that they own us. I mean, that we're an investment. They're investment.
Yeah, they're the creditors.
They're trying to protect it. They're trying to protect us.
Yeah, and they are. And it's really, they're being very practical, victors, if you will, so that we win and they win. And that's what's so sane about the Chinese, as I understand them, even though there's some things I don't like about them, but here's something that came up a few weeks ago. Someone said that Mao was a Jesuit. I might have heard that a long time ago, just one ear and out the other.
That's news to me.
He led the revolution. It was a communist revolution.
Yeah.
And who built the communists in Russia? It was Lenin, and the Jewish bankers.
Uh-huh.
So maybe through the Jesuit door, they created their own puppet to conquer China. Only they didn't quite get it the way they wanted, or something like that. But and Fidel Castro was a Jesuit also. I came to believe by listening to some other people that he was set up to do that so they can continue to create this war with the communists.
Mm-hmm.
As long as they control the tension or the means to the levers of war, they control us.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that was part of it. I just throw that out there as a hypothesis.
Mm-hmm.
And but the Chinese, they got out from underneath the communists, really, or whoever was behind them, and they took control of their own country. And I just find them as very practical and pretty sane people. Uh, and if you go back and you read what Zhou Enlai wrote in 1952, the document about peaceful coexistence, they're still playing that out today. They don't want war.
Yeah.
They want to get along and live our lives and get along with others. And that's what they're doing in business with other countries. And we need what you have, and we can help you build yourself out, which is what Kennedy wanted to do.
Yeah.
He made a few forays in Africa that way, and in the Peace Corps and so on. But there were people that didn't want that, so he wasn't big enough. But now we have the alliance all together: U.S., China, Russia, basically,
the BRICS,
and others were able to take down the monster.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I see it. We couldn't do it alone. Maybe the military, if they had a coup, then it'd be something else. If they said they were planning that. But we need more than just taking a lot of people down. We need to change the system, and that's what the Chinese and the Russians and probably a lot of the white hats have helped to make happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, there's just so many things to consider. There's a million facets to this, and you can only pay attention to so many at a time.
Oh, tell me. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I've got about 3 days work to do in 36 hours. So.
Yeah, I can imagine. Get ready for your trip.
I've got two units, 2 suites I need to get ready for guests that are coming in while we're gone. So I better get doing it.
You're a busy businessman.
Oh boy, yeah. Well, I want this thing to happen so I can put everything else on hold.
Yeah, I understand. That's the way it is.
But I'm excited with what's happening today and what's happened yesterday, and the justice got sworn in. That was an exciting time. I watched that.
Yeah, I got a chance to see that too. That was good.
Yeah. And if these guys that are doing this protesting, they're getting paid. They're getting paid.
Oh yeah. Oh sure.
And that's where they need to get. They need to cut off the source of funds, and we know where it's coming from.
Yeah, it's pretty hard to stop people from expressing their First Amendment, right?
Oh, that's fine. They can express it, but these guys are organized. They know what to say, and they're being paid to do it. You take the money away, and
look, if we had some bad guys in the White House, wouldn't you want to have the right to express yourself? You need that. It's just that it doesn't always work. Sometimes the bad guys take advantage of it.
Well,
it is.
This is too obvious.
I know, but I think a lot of people see through it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's
People
really
who are maybe toward the center of the Democratic Party will be moving a little over to the right. There's a group called the Walkaway movement. It'll be speaking near the end of the month, about a week before the election, and they're kind of feeling it that they're going to get a lot of Democrats to move to the Republican Party just because of what we've seen here in the last.
Oh, by the way, speaking of election, didn't I read somewhere that there will be no election because you can't have an election when there's martial law?
Yeah, that's out there, and it just remains to be seen how it's all going to unfold. If Jassara happens by the 4th, does that mean that we're off into a new world, the new republic, and then we wait another 120 days?
But could be.
What's 120 days from November, December, February? Yeah.
Well, when you clean out the half of the Congress and the Senate, and all of a sudden there's going to be some new rules to go by. And also, if they do away with and implement, and this could very well happen, that the term limits will be brought in, and then all of a sudden, have to be done on a rotation basis so they don't all go out at the same time.
Right. Oh, yeah, that's what people have been saying we need for a long time, but no one's done anything.
I know Trump has mentioned it, but it hasn't been a big deal because that's not really high on his priority list.
Not at this time. But, he can't. Robert David Steele said, you should be doing something about the elections. I think that'll all come in due course. I'm sure there's a larger master plan for what they'd like to achieve.
Yeah.
But all in due time.
Yep, that's right. Well, I need to...
Lot on its plate. And look, there's only about a month left before elections, so...
Yeah, that's right.
If arrests are going to start happening, and martial law, my God, there's going to be all kinds of stuff. So I think that there is a possibility we won't have that election. We'll see. It's quite possible. We'll see how it goes.
There's got to be some requirements before a person can run for office, like being a U.S. citizen for one. How in the world did Obama? He's an illegal. I mean, he's about as...
Yeah, well, the thing is, what do you take for proof?
He was a terrorist.
And how are you able to ascertain that about someone?
Well, I'll tell you what, you go to apply for a job, you got credentials, you got to place them, or you ain't going to get hired. And it's the same way for running for office. You got to have certain credentials and proof. And
what is proof that you're a citizen? What is it?
Birth certificate. Birth certificate.
What is a citizen? Someone who's been naturalized. We know they're citizens. They've taken a test and they've got documents and so on. But
true.
You and I were just born here. Maybe we have our birth certificate, and that's it. And we're just signing on. Yes, I am a citizen, and that's it.
Well, you show your birth certificate. That's all.
Yeah, well,
so you and I are the only ones that qualify.
A long time ago, I can't get my copy of my original. You don't understand, you need a centralized database.
Yeah.
And that's what we're missing. And I think that's what we need, a national ID card.
Well, Mark, if you want to run for office and you don't have a birth certificate, you better get on it.
Well, I have a copy of, a certificate or something like that. But I'm just saying, there's no hard and fast way to document everyone who is actually a citizen. Are you actually a citizen because you can prove it, or because you were born here?
Well, I know that I applied to get a Nexus card, which is pretty hard to get, and I had to have a birth certificate, and it had to be original.
Yeah, well, there are a lot of ways of counterfeiting. And then you have to go to the source to see if it's original or not, and all that. How
did that work out for Obama? I mean, that was about as illegal as ever. It was definitely a copy, and had been forged.
Yeah, well, you got people at the top who just let it go through.
But nobody really outside of Pompeo or that sheriff. I mean, he had it all down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well,
isn't it interesting?
All kinds of people here in this country have, forged documents who, are able to get through the system. Oh, you're legal. Okay, let's look at the thing, and you can get a job and so on. And until someone comes in and demands something more, I guess, and can check up on it. And who's bothering to check? You need something of a database.
You noticed how Trump made a big deal. Do you remember that? And then all of a sudden, it was dropped.
Yeah.
And that's where somebody says, hey, if you're going to run for president, you need to drop this.
Oh.
I'll bet you. I'll bet you. Or maybe it was all planned. Maybe it was meant to be.
Planting the seed for a later time.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah.
Could be.
Well, I better go, my friend.
Okay.
I'll try to get some time to talk to you tomorrow night.
All right.
Okay, my friend.
All right.
Talk
Good
to you
night
later.
now.
Yeah, night.